Hi, I'm Kristen.
Hi, I'm Michelle.
We're readers and writers.
We're sci-fi and fantasy fans, and this is the best of all worlds.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, as you may be able to tell by the title of our podcast, which is world building. Michelle brought up a very good point that if we have a podcast called The Best of All Worlds, we should probably dedicate at least one of our episodes to talking about our favorite worlds in sci-fi and fantasy. So that is what we're going to do here today.
Yes, and I don't know about for you, but world building is probably one of the main reasons that I prefer sci-fi and fantasy to other genres.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a lot more room for creativity when, really anything can happen within the bounds of either the future or this other realm that's not quite the same as ours. I think it does allow a lot of room for interesting scenarios and creativity and explorations that you couldn't really get from something that takes place just on regular old Earth.
Exactly. You take away all the limitations of what's physically, realistically possible, and it allows you to really dive into interesting concepts and ideas, which is my favorite part.
Yes. So before we get started, what are some other things that you consider really important to you when choosing your favorite worlds?
Yeah, when I'm choosing my favorite world, or things that I really find interesting in world building, first and foremost is I want it to be new and exciting. When I'm introduced to a world that is very interesting and unlike anything I've ever seen, I find it very enticing, and I want to know everything I can about this new, strange place.
Yes, like an element of mystery, like how does this work? That's always fun.
Exactly. The other thing I really like is when the dialogue or even just the prose matches the world building, so they use words that would only exist in this world. I think fantasy does this a lot with when they're saying oh my gods instead of oh my god, or they have these little under the breath phrases. I love stuff like that because it's something that can only exist in that world, and it really makes it a lot more immersive and believable. And then of course, because I love sci-fi, especially dystopian sci-fi, when a world can amplify a theme, I am here for that.
Yes, yeah. I'm always here for the themes, so I totally agree with that one. I think a world that is really central to the themes that the characters are exploring in the book, that'll win big points for me. I also really enjoy a world with just a really rich history. I'm a bit of a history buff myself, so I love it when there are threads in the past of this world that are still having ramifications today, and it's connected to the culture and who's in power and all of that. I love a good deep lore of how things came to be the way they are. So you'll probably see that pattern when I start talking about some of my favorite worlds. But outside of that, the other thing, being mainly a fantasy reader, is I love a good magic system. If you've got really interesting creative rules for how things work, if it's deeply intertwined with the culture or how the particular characters interact with the world, that's just really good stuff for me. So I enjoy a good magic system as well.
I would have to agree. I think I also really enjoy a good magic system. I think the history is fun. I think that it can be really interesting. It's harder for me to keep a hold of those topics in my mind, just to really retain all of that and make sense of that. Whereas when it comes to the character or the magic system in general, that is something I also really enjoy, which is why I like hard fantasy typically, probably because I like sci-fi. But
Yeah, it makes sense. I'd say hard magic systems are basically just made up science, which I enjoy that too.
Exactly. Like Mistborn or something like that, where the magic has really clear boundaries and rules, but it's unique and interesting. Like Mistborn's a really good honorable mention example that I would want to bring up.
Yes. So yeah, on the topic of honorable mentions, before we get into the main series and worlds we want to talk about, I have two that I wanted to bring up. First of which is the Dresden Files. The only reason it's not one of the stories I'm going to talk about today is because we already have an entire other episode about that. So I'd recommend checking out our episode 2 about the Dresden Files if you want to learn more about that world. There's a spoiler-free section if you don't want any spoilers, and then we just dive straight on into it after that. Dresden Files is one of my favorite worlds, but we've already talked enough about that, so moving on.
Exactly. We can and have gone on and on about it.
Yes, we could go on and on about it more, but you probably don't want to hear that. So my other honorable mention is you simply cannot have a world building podcast without giving a shout out to Lord of the Rings.
Absolutely.
I mean, you just have to. It's required. So shout out to Lord of the Rings. It's a great world, like super intricate, lots of great history and lore and all of that. But it's been talked about a million times on the internet by people who know it in a lot more detail than I do. So I respect it. I love it, but not going to talk about it today because other people have and will do it better than me.
I mean, it's the father of all fantasy, basically. So, like, to not mention it would be like to just pretend that fantasy isn't almost exclusively based on Lord of the Rings.
Disrespect.
You're right. No, I mean, if you don't watch Lord of the Rings or reread it at least once a year, like, what's wrong with you? Just kidding. No shade to anyone who's not a big Lord of the Rings fan. That's okay.
Yes.
We will forgive you.
It is totally okay to not be on the Lord of the Rings bandwagon. But
exactly.
I do appreciate it. So just wanted to give it a shout out there. Any other honorable mentions from your side, Michelle?
Yeah, I wanted to mention a sci-fi novel that didn't end up on my actual list, but it has a lot of things I really enjoy, which is Three Body Problem. And what I really like about that world building is there's this whole alien system that requires completely letting go of what it means to be a human and to reimagine what life might be like if your world was completely different and instead of one suns, you had 3 suns. It's very fascinating. There's a lot of historical stuff, like you had just mentioned. There's a lot of callbacks to famous philosophers and mathematicians. And it's just a good time. But it's just not in my top, maybe because I'm not like the biggest historian or, really that into alien stuff, but I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I might have to check that one out because you got me intrigued.
Yeah, it's a good one. There's a reason that I think it was made into a TV show recently, so. Now we get to geek out and actually dive into these different worlds that we want to talk about.
Yes. So we're not doing these in any particular, top 5 order or anything. We've each picked 3 worlds and we're just gonna talk about them one by one. And basically these are not necessarily this is my number 1 world. These are just 3 good examples of kind of different worlds that we both enjoy.
Exactly. These are worlds that are wildly different from each other, and I think even between our 2 lists, wildly different from each other, but just kind of express the vastness that can be world building within this genre. Or these 2 genres.
Yes, so trying to capture as much of the wide world of sci-fi fantasy world building as we can, but also picking some of our personal favorites along the way.
Exactly.
All right, you want to get us started off with your number 1?
All right, well, I wanted to go with something. I really like classic sci-fi. I think if you're into sci-fi, it's really important to read some of the classics so you kind of know just what started the genre. I mean, kind of like when we're talking about Lord of the Rings, like what started these genres? What were the ideas and concepts that really got people stepping away from standard fiction and diving into these fantastical worlds? And for me, one of the books that I've read multiple times and I still find myself wanting to reread it over and over because it's so applicable to not only our modern world, but just the world building in and of itself is absolutely fascinating, is a book called Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. It was written a long time ago. We're talking the 1950s. And essentially the world is a far future reality where every single human being is a clone. However, within those clones is a caste system that is instilled upon them through their entire life. So from the time that they're created in these artificial wombs, their fate is determined. So there's one caste, for example, that is fed alcohol in the womb as a baby intentionally to decrease their intelligence and other reasons so that they can fit into a specific caste. And the world building is incredibly allegorical and thematic in the way that it's done, which is typical of a lot of classic sci-fi. But this one in particular is kind of a tragedy, and again, it is definitely an allegory, and I find it very fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like fantasy doesn't do allegories as much, maybe thanks to the influence of Tolkien not liking allegories in stories, but I think that is interesting that it's like a caste system allegory, because there's a lot to explore and unpack there for sure.
Yeah, the whole world is, again, everyone's a clone, and you see the story from the perspective of someone who's actually from a higher caste system, and he leaves the safety of the city that he's from, and he sees a kind of wild tribal version of humanity, and he comes back and he just it's really hard to talk about without spoilers, but very fascinating world building that is very applicable to the modern day, because it's more about the effects of psychological conditioning, and it's just using a metaphor of what if we just took away all individuality. This is what it's essentially doing, more or less.
Yeah, it sounds like some pretty good thematic exploration in that one.
Yes, and that's kind of how a lot of classic sci-fi is, that they tend to be much more based on exploring the consequence of a modern sociological issue that we deal with and putting it on extreme.
And there's a lot of value in that, because we all know there are plenty of modern sociological issues to grapple with.
Exactly.
So. Lots of fuel for novels. Yay!
Yes, the whole dystopian genre, if you like to explore those kinds of things, dystopia is just all that. But yours is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum there.
Yeah, so I'm diving straight in with full on the biggest world you can find. Okay, there may be other worlds out there that are bigger than this one, but I'm impressed if there are, because my first one I want to talk about is the Wheel of Time series. It is 14 books long. They are all huge books. And the way I like to pitch the world building in this one is, if you have ever looked at a fantasy map and gone, man, I wish we could actually go to every single place that is on this fantasy map, then Wheel of Time is for you. Because throughout this whole series, every single place that is on this fantasy map is going to come into play one way or another in the story. There's all sorts of traveling across the world. There's so many different cultures. Wheel of Time is expansive, epic world building at its best. It is so intricate, even down to the details of what people wear, which is not my thing, but I appreciate that level of detail was put into this. So it's just truly a masterpiece of how intricately can you build a world and then tell a good story on top of that world that really explores it in depth. And gets some really good themes out of what's built there. I think I'm going to narrow down to really the two things that I like the most about the world building, which kind of came up earlier, is I really like magic systems and I really like history. So starting off with the history of the Wheel of Time, it's a very interesting just concept of time overall in this world. Like, time is a wheel, like it's cyclical, so like people are born and reborn and like woven in and out of the wheel. Like the term that people use is like the wheel weaves as the wheel wills. So it's very much like threads of fate being woven in and out. A lot of that kind of imagery going on. But effectively, this means that certain people will be reborn. So there's this prophecy about the dragon reborn. And that's really kind of what the story starts off of, is that, you know, the dragon, this famous, super powerful magic user from the previous age, is going to be reborn. And it's connected to the apocalypse. So fun times.
Don't you love that? Don't you love that?
But there's just this really interesting like interplay between the current age, where the Wheel of Time takes place, and that past age where the original dragon was from. Effectively, that past age was like a super advanced civilization. And due to circumstances, all the male magic users went crazy and blew up the world. So they had this giant apocalypse. And so now in the current age, we're basically living in like a medieval era because humanity is still recovering from what happened in that past age. But there are just these little like crumbs of this ancient civilization that are left behind. And as the story goes on, the characters spend more and more time uncovering these pieces of this ancient civilization and like relearning things that were destroyed in this huge cataclysm. And it's really interesting. It almost has like a little bit of like a sci-fi vibe to it, like this ancient technology is suddenly being unearthed. Which I really appreciate that. And I think that's one of the more unique and cool things about Wheel of Time, is just being set against this backdrop of a ruined civilization.
That is very fascinating.
Yes. It's like, if you're a sci-fi fan, that might be the way to get you interested in Wheel of Time, is it does actually have like a little bit of like futuristic technology in the kind of magic-y sense incorporated into the story. So that's a lot of fun. And then the magic system itself is very interesting and very much tied into that past apocalypse, where effectively this ancient evil called the Dark One was breaking free, and there were male channelers and female channelers who channeled two different halves of this one power. And the male channelers decided to break off and do this like super dangerous mission to seal up the Dark One in his prison. And they succeeded in sealing him up, but they also like super wrecked the male half of this one power, and then they all started going crazy and blew up the world. So not great. So we're living in a future where only women can channel this power, and if men channel the power, they go mad. So the women actually have to like go out and hunt down the men to keep them from like blowing up the world again. So there's lots of interesting gender dynamics in this world because of that, and because like only the women can do magic without going insane. So that's really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Wheel of Time world building. But I've been talking long enough, so I'm gonna leave it there. But if any of that sounds interesting to you, Wheel of Time is really cool and a lot of fun. It's a huge commitment, but if you love epic world building, it's totally worth it.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got me sold a little bit on the whole, like, it's a post-apocalyptic, like, rebuilt world from a very advanced society back to, like, a medieval I enjoy that at a conceptual level. That makes me a lot more interested. I've seen the first season on Amazon of the show, so I kind of vaguely knew some of that, like the fact that men aren't allowed to use the magic, which I thought was an interesting world building choice. So I'm definitely a little bit more intrigued now, I'm not gonna lie, actually.
All right, I win. Join the Wheel of Time bandwagon, please.
Yay! But speaking of cyclical timelines, my next book and its world is also cyclical in the nature of the world building. This story is one of my favorites of all time because it does so many things really well, and one of those is like the world building specifically. So the story is 6 short stories that are wrapped around each other. So the first chapter and the last chapter are the same character, the second and the second to last are the same character, and so on. So the middle, or the 6th character, is all in one little chunk. And it goes from like the 1800s to the far, far future. And each story references things that you have seen in other stories. So, for example, the first one is a journal of a guy who's a doctor on a ship, and his journal is read by the next character, and the next character reads the letters of the previous character, and so on and so forth.
Interesting.
So they're all kind of like seeing the lives of the other characters that we're getting to read the whole way through. And it does one of those things that I talked about that I really enjoyed, which is how the dialogue and the character's speech matches the world building. And this story takes it to the next level, where the prose of each section matches the timeline that it's in. So the first timeline, again, 1800s. So we're talking like old school English, a little bit strange to kind of read from somebody of a modern perspective. The next section is the early 1900s, and that guy is really obsessed with music, so all of his metaphors have music involved in them. And then there's like a 70s journalist gumshoe kind of style vibe. Then there is a guy who is in modern times, like 2010s maybe, approximately, like give or take, and he's a publisher. And then we go into a dystopian future in a place called New Seoul, where there are basically clones. Now I realize that 2 of the stories I've mentioned have clones, and that is not intentional. It's not like I look for stories that have clones in them. It is a coincidence.
Yes.
And then that one is really interesting because they call movies Disney's. Like, instead of the word movie, they call it Disney. And in that particular section of the book, they consistently use modern companies as verbs or nouns. Like how we would use like Kleenex, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we know that's a face tissue, but we call it a Kleenex because it's, you know, anyone who said Kleenex, you would know what they mean, even though Kleenex is a name brand, and most of the time it's not actually Kleenex brand. And then he does something really, really fascinating in that far future section. So the far future is actually post-apocalyptic, and the people are now all in tribes. And the prose from this section is almost difficult. It is actually, I'm not even going to say almost, it is genuinely difficult to read because it is so far off from like how we speak. It's fascinating. And the main character meets with this lady who has like really advanced technology, and they have almost no technology. And so that part of the world building is very fascinating, very, very fast, because it's like tribal humans, which feels like something that's really, really old, but it takes place in the far, far future. So there's like some modern or even like advanced technology that shouldn't exist, but they have access to it, and they almost like worship it. Like it's some like magical power or something.
Interesting. Well, you have me intrigued. What is this story? Because I don't think I recognize it.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even say. So this story is called Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell.
Okay, I've heard of it.
I love it so much.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by like the historical time jumps. You know, being the person who likes history, like I think watching like different time periods, like that idea appeals to me a lot, and that's pretty cool. Especially like the way the writing style actually changes between the time periods. I think
Yes.
that sounds really cool.
Yeah, as an author, it is something just like mind-boggling that he was able to pull off so effectively. And again, each section has a direct reference to the previous. So in terms of themes, it's just off the charts. I just literally can't talk about what any of those themes are without any kind of spoilers. So there's some really interesting themes that are happening in this story that I really, really enjoy. And the storytelling style, switching between the time periods, makes those themes just that much more impressive and well executed.
You got me intrigued about this one too. It's easy to get me intrigued by talking about world building because I just think world building is so interesting. So if you pitch me a good world, I'm going to want to read it.
So speaking of good worlds, what is your second world example?
So my second world example, I kind of thought, back and forth, like, do I want to include this one or not? But in the end, I'm like, I gotta include it because it's just, it's one of those worlds that's like, there's a reason it's so dang popular because it's just, it's like, it captivates everyone's like imaginations for good reason. And that would be Harry Potter. So, I know Harry Potter can be kind of a controversial thing to talk about on the internet right now. Right. So we're not here to talk about, themes, or we're definitely not here to talk about the author. We're just here for the world building today. And I think the world building really stands on its own from, whatever the author's beliefs are, which people may or may not agree with. I know I have my own issues with it, but the world building itself is, it's just so magical. Like, it's kind of the opposite end of fantasy from Wheel of Time, but it's just like the kind of whimsical, like, world building where it's like, is the logic like completely 100% sound? No, but that's not the point. The point is that it's fun. Right. And it's just like the kind of world you just want to go adventuring around. You want to get a wand. You want to get a broomstick. You want to go fly around. You want to duel all your enemies and jinx them and eat beans that taste like earwax and then spit them out and laugh with your friends. Like, these are the kinds of things that just make the Harry Potter world so fun. And, like, like, complete opposite from, like, dystopian sci-fi worlds. It's right. Like, this is the kind of world that you actually want to come live here. And I think there's a lot of value in that. Just, like, the world where you just want to escape to. You want to imagine yourself in it. You can see yourself going to Hogwarts. You can see yourself getting sorted into one of the houses and, like, identifying with one more than the others. And just all the fun things that come along with Hogwarts and just this magic system that's so much more focused on creativity than it is on, like, hard and fast rules. Like, I think there's really something to be said for a magic system that's built on just how creative you can be. Sure, it results in, like, plot holes with, like, if they had a time turner, why can't they just keep changing time and stuff like that? Right. But at the same time, it's like, the story is written in a way where it's like, that's not the point. Like, the point is not to be a hard and fast rule system. The point is to, like, set the atmosphere and just have this whimsical school where, like, anything can happen if you believe hard enough.
Exactly.
Which, it's a very different type of world building, but I wanted to bring it up here because I think that, I'd call it soft world building. And I think it's a completely valid type of world building, in my opinion. Like, not everything has to have hard and fast rules. Sometimes things can just be vibes, and vibes are good too.
Vibes are actually absolutely, like, an important part of world building, and I think there's a reason why Harry Potter has become such a popular thing. Like, I know people have their issues with the author itself, but there's a reason that the world is so popular and widely accepted. It's just so fun to imagine yourself in that world. I think we all, growing up, and I mean, I don't know about for you, but, like, for me, I remember watching the first Harry Potter at quite a young age, and it was really impactful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unabashedly, I am, like, currently writing a fan fiction crossover between Harry Potter and Full Metal Alchemist, so
Fun. So much fun.
It's a fun world. Like, there's a reason I chose to set that fan fiction in the Harry Potter world, even though it features characters and plot lines from both, is just because the Harry Potter world is fun. It's a world you want to hang out in, and there's a lot of value to that.
A school for magic. Like, you literally couldn't ask for more. A school for magic. That aesthetic, that idea, that concept is just fun.
Yes. Peak vibes.
Yes. Speaking of vibes and going in the completely opposite direction, the next story that I would like to mention is actually, it is a fantastic exploration of an anti-hero as a protagonist, callback to our favorite tropes video, episode. So Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence is not his most popular series, but it is the one that I really, really like because of the world building. And actually it was sold to me. One of my friends gave me his copy and was like, hey, I think you'll really like this book because it's a fantasy, but there's technology. And I was like, say what now? All right, color me intrigued. Best of both worlds, literally. So I picked it up having no idea what I was getting into. The main character is deplorable. I mean, we're talking a true psychopath, all right?
Oh.
So, like, you know... Proceed with caution. If you don't like anti-heroes as the main character, you probably won't like this. But the world building is so cool. Not only is there a lot of political tension between the different areas across the map, there's also technology hidden across the world in these ancient relics. And there's distinctively a scene that I remember where they were in this, like, underground or, like, I don't know, like this ancient temple or something. And it was full of technology that we would consider, like, far future technology. There's basically this device he gets at some point within the story that allows him to see from a satellite. Like, he's basically, like, looking through a camera or a satellite. But in the world, like, they have no words for that because they're so far removed from that world. But I really had a good time with that because it was the best of everything I enjoy. It's like a little bit of a grim, dark fantasy. But the world building has technology. And one of my favorite video games called Horizon Zero Dawn has a similar thing where... they're really far future, but they're also really, like, regressed in terms of, like, technology. But there is ancient technology lying around that they don't fully understand. And they can't access even, like, half of its capabilities. Because, like, imagine you had a tablet in, like, 1900. You just, like, somehow... landed a tablet in front of you, you'd have no way to power it, so you wouldn't know how it works, kind of deal.
Yeah. It kind of gives me the same vibes as Wheel of Time, except in Wheel of Time, it's not like our technology, it's like advanced magic technology. So it's like kind of different in that way, where it's like it's really advanced technology, but it's not something that we would understand from our world. Right. So that's interesting. Exactly. Like you literally just call a satellite. I think that's kind of a pretty cool detail.
Exactly. I actually was having that exact thought while you were talking about Wheel of Time. I was like, you know what? I feel like Prince of Thorns trilogy kind of has a similar vibe with the ancient technology that's more like a relic, but it's super advanced. Yeah, and the character does have an interesting journey and does change as a person throughout the story. And I will say that without any spoilers as to which direction he changes, but he changes.
Redemption arc? No, you don't have to tell me.
I can't say.
That's fair.
I think the best way to go into that is to question, will he be better or will he get worse? That is the best way to go into that story.
Interesting. It's a good exploration for an anti-hero, that's for sure.
Yes. Like I said, I really love an anti-hero story. And actually, this book is part of what got me back into reading this little series. Because before that, I was kind of reading maybe like 3 to 4 books a year. Like, not a lot, just kind of like a passive hobby. And I read those pretty fast. And then I kind of went on like a whole fantasy binge for a little while. Game of Thrones, another Brent Weeks story, the Shadow Assassin one, and yeah, I went on a little binge after that.
Yes, I always appreciate a good book that can get you back into reading.
Exactly. So what about you? What's your last world to explore with us?
My last world is also a bit of like a sci-fi fantasy mashup. This is the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson. So this is maybe a hot take among Sanderson fans, but Skyward is actually my favorite Brandon Sanderson world and not like the Cosmere.
Oh no!
I know, hot take. I the Cosmere is great too, but I think what I really like about the world of Skyward is that it's kind of the same thing you were mentioning, where it's like it's got the deep like lore and interesting like technologies that are almost a little bit like magic. And like all the things that I love about fantasy world building, but it's got sci-fi aesthetics, it's got fighter pilots, it's got aliens, it's got AI, it's got random like space slugs, like it's got all sorts of like fun sci-fi things with all the benefits of the fantasy world building that I love. So this one's really hard to talk about without giving spoilers, so I'm going to start out with kind of a description of book 1, and then I'm going to give really vague world building details for books 2 and beyond. So if you want like absolutely zero spoilers whatsoever, I'd maybe skip to the end. But if you're okay with super vague world building spoilers, like surprise, the world gets bigger in the future books, then you're good. You can stick with me here. I won't spoil any major plot twists or anything like that. So basically this world starts off in this planet that's called Detritus. It's just covered in a bunch of junk from like a ruined previous civilization. You may sense the theme of ruined civilizations. Apparently this is something we both like.
Yes.
But there's this colony of humans who are living underneath the surface of this like destroyed planet. They are refugees from like another planet that crash landed here, and they're currently being besieged by some like unknown aliens. And so basically the society is, living in hiding. These aliens are like coming down trying to bomb them. And so the effect of this is that fighter pilots are like the main like heroes of their world, like the people who are going out and defending them and keeping them from being destroyed. So that's like the highest calling that someone on Detritus can achieve, is to become a fighter pilot. So it builds up this whole cool like fighter pilot culture thing going on, but also, behind just the fun sci-fi fighting backdrop, there's also like we start getting more and more hints of like what really happened to this destroyed civilization.
Right.
Like the main character finds like an old like AI spaceship like hidden in these caverns, and that's pretty early on, so it's not that much of a spoiler. And so she starts to get to know this AI spaceship, who's also very sassy, which is fun. And then
love that. I love sassy AI.
Yes. And then starts to like learn more about like why was the spaceship abandoned here? Like why is AI not a thing right now? Like why is everyone like so afraid of having AI? And it's really interesting, like all the little tiny threads that are set up in book 1 that will like later get expanded upon a ton in the future books. So there's lots of like interesting, just like something happened here, and we're trying to piece together the pieces of like what's really going on. Why is this planet junk? Why are we being besieged?
Right.
Why is this random spaceship here? and all the questions will eventually get answered. So that's.
I don't think that's a spoiler.
No.
I don't think that's a spoiler. I think you're saying, like, you know, you're going to get answers to the questions that you have. I feel like you're encouraging people. I mean, that none of that felt like a spoiler at all. I feel like that's like, yeah, trust Sanderson. He'll give you answers. He'll give you answers. It's Sanderson. Of course he's going to give you answers.
Yes. But here's the mild spoiler. So the reason I really love this series is like that setup is great, and the places that the setup goes is great. But I particularly love the fact that a mild world building spoiler, after book 1, the universe expands and we meet like more alien peoples. So, spoiler alert, there are more aliens, but so we get to explore like all these different like alien cultures, and they're all very different from each other, and the way they like interact is pretty cool, and just seeing how their like species and the planets they come from have shaped the way they are, and it's basically like all the good stuff of like, you know, political, cultural, like
Nice.
the stuff that happens in fantasy world building, but just instead it's space and aliens, which is I like the space and aliens flavoring to my stories. I honestly probably prefer that over like traditional fantasy. But traditional fantasy tends to do the humanistic world building that I like a little bit more. So I feel like that's, if more sci-fi books were like this, whereas like kind of fantasy type stories but in a sci-fi setting, I'd be reading more. And they're probably out there. I just haven't found them yet.
There probably are.
So
I feel like I feel like Star Wars is under that category.
yeah, no, Star Wars is a good example of, you know, there are a lot of books out there, which is intimidating, so I haven't read any of them, but at least in terms of like the Star Wars like shows and movies I've watched, I really enjoy that world building as well. Like that's my kind of sci-fi that I tend to prefer. Yes, give me the politics and intrigue and interesting cultures, please.
Yeah. And I'm like, that stuff's fine, but like, make me think about society, please. That's what I'm always asking of my books. Let me think about society and this technology we have and whether or not it's a good thing. Let me philosophize.
And I want to philosophize too. I feel like I tend to want to philosophize about like character arcs. Redemption. Everyone needs a redemption arc.
Yes. You know, I will say that is, at least in my experience, I'm not to say a lot of modern sci-fi isn't getting better at this, but a lot of sci-fi does struggle from a lack of character and plot because the focus is so much on the themes and the technology. So that is a common issue, especially in older sci-fi.
Yeah.
That it's all about the world building and not at all about the characters. And I should caveat that Brave New World does have that issue where it's not so much a character-driven story.
Yeah. No, I feel like I connect to themes most when the themes are portrayed through the characters. Like, I appreciate themes through world building, absolutely, but I like to see it in both the world building and the characters, and kind of almost like I like to see it in the collision of the characters with the world in which they live.
Right.
Like, if a story does that, then I'm like, okay, that lands for me pretty much every time.
I agree. That is also something I really enjoy, which is why a lot of classic sci-fi is not it for me. I mean, they're interesting to me, but they're a lot harder to read. But I like Brave New World's world despite that.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that character work is it leaves a little bit to be desired.
Yeah, there's like always those stories where it's like, well, it does things that I don't like, but it's just so good that I can look past it because I just don't care.
Exactly. I literally just could read Brave New World every year. Like, I just really enjoy that story. I think at the end of the day, we have a lot of overlap in what we enjoy in world building.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. We didn't talk about this before we got into the podcast, so it was fun kind of seeing where we overlapped in kind of surprising ways. Like we really clearly ruined ancient civilizations.
Yes. Yes, give us an apocalypse or a post-apocalyptic world that has rebuilt. Yes, always.
But yeah, we're definitely look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments what your favorite worlds are. Do you agree with us on some of these? Do you have ones that you're like, that should have gotten an honorable mention along with Lord of the Rings?
Yes, I mean, we could honestly probably list out 50 examples if we really took the time, but we'd be here all day.
Yes, there are so many good worlds. Our podcast is called The Best of All Worlds, but it's hard to fit all into only 45 minutes.
Yes. But we definitely appreciate you guys giving us a listen, and we look forward to your suggestions of stories. And I know I'm coming away from this somehow feeling like I might actually take on Wheel of Time. I don't know. I'm still on the fence because a lot of books, it's almost 12,000 pages. We looked it up before we started. So it's a little bit of an investment, but I'm intrigued after what you've told me. I'm not going to lie.
It's a good time. Come join me. Join the club.
I may just.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Like, share, subscribe, all the things, you know what to do. And we'll see you in the next episode.